Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Muslim CEOs podcast series where amazing and influential guests share their journeys and successes with Deen being an integral part. Before we get to the episode, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as connect and follow us on social media platforms on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok and Twitter. The handle of all of these platforms is @MuslimCEOs. You can also listen to this podcast on all major platforms such as Spotify and Apple by searching Muslim CEOs Podcast. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you get notified of all future episodes. Let's be inspired and have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who will enable us to be successful in this world and the hereafter. Ameen. So Sultan Choudhury, OBE, has over 3 decades of experience in professional and financial services, playing an instrumental role as part of the founding management team that obtained Western Europe's first authorized Islamic banking license. He subsequently served as CEO for 8 years, driving a technology and distribution-led turnaround of a loss-making business to profitability and scaling up to achieve exponential growth. Sultan is currently Executive Chairman of OFFA, a leading Sharia compliant fintech providing home finance and bridging finance. Sultan's ongoing service to the Muslim community, he has spent 14 years as a trustee of the National Zakat Foundation, where he serves as chairman. He also serves on the board of UK's Islamic Finance Council. Sultan, assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Muslim CEO podcast.
Hey, assalamu alaikum. Happy to be here.
No, it's a great pleasure. It's a great pleasure. We met recently at the Muslim CEO event where you gave some talk and you was also referred to as Sir Sultan, which you kind of find a little bit embarrassing.
Yeah, it's amusing. Yeah, that somebody said Sir Sultan, but it's happened before.
Yeah.
But it's not correct. Yeah, the OBE, sometimes people think you have to use the word Sir. But
you never know, inshallah, never know. One day.
Not sure I want that pressure.
So, Sultan, thank you for coming on today. We're obviously going to touch into about Islamic finance, your journey, your history, how Islamic finance, it's becoming more and more prominent. A lot of events that I go to, a lot of Muslims are now talking about Islamic finance. It's growing. So I really want to kind of delve into it. But before we do, I want to kind of just start off, what made you get into Islamic finance? I know that you were an accountant or trained as an accountant sort of thing. Was it a simple sort of segue into Islamic finance or did it just happen?
No, I think the journey begins with an academic interest in Islamic finance when I was at university. So I studied economics and econometrics at Nottingham. And while I was there, I read a few articles on Islamic economics, which is different from Islamic finance. And being an economist, of course, that was interesting for me. And whilst I kind of dabbled in it, it didn't really come to anything. Ended up doing a dissertation, completely different dissertation on foreign aid. Kind of just focused on my next step, which was becoming an accountant, as it was. So I qualified as an accountant. But then when I entered, I guess, conventional finance through stockbroking, the trading of shares, I guess that's when it started coming back. So I'm there working in the financial services sector, albeit stockbroking. It's not what people consider finance. I'm not financing something. And that there was a group of like-minded colleagues, and we started studying it again. And we started looking at models of home finance that exist in America. Some of the players that had launched home finance products in the UK, Kuwaiti banks. And so that kind of interest developed. And then the opportunity came when we got wind of this first Islamic bank being set up. That 2 of us, myself and the late Azhar Khan, who was also in the sector, one of the pioneers as well, with myself of that first Islamic bank, we managed to get a job there, albeit we took a pay cut, we took a positional cut. And I think that's one of the important lessons. If you really want to do something, you're not letting money drive your decision making. Not the remuneration isn't the key. It's the achievement, the goal, the thing that you're interested in. Because if you work in something that you're interested in, genuinely interested in, and you genuinely believe in it, it doesn't feel like you're working. in reality, right? You're doing something you enjoy.
Exactly, 100%. It's like your part of life, part of your day to day, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, and that's how I ended up in it. You have to have the interest, the desire first and foremost, or it's just another job.
So was this Islamic Bank of Britain?
That was Islamic Bank of Britain. Yeah.
Bank of Britain.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were on that founding team, and we had the full startup experience that is now very common and understood. This kind of sweat equity approach, building up everything from scratch. And I did all of that. I drove a white van. We plugged in the cables in the call center. We hired people from scratch. We did assessment centers. We put in all the procedures, did the product from scratch, built the system, parameterized it. Stuff that actually a lot of fintechs do today. But then it was quite odd, right? It was like, going into developing the first bank, never mind Islamic bank, on the high street for many, many years. For decades, there hadn't been a new bank, and so it was very interesting experience. And even now, to this day, I would fall back on some of that experience. It was a very intense 9 to 12 months of my life, that setup phase.
So you've been there, like I said, through your bio. You've been at Western Europe. You've been CEO there. How did OFFA come about? Why OFFA? Why was it another Islamic bank? Because we've got a few kind of options available. How is it that OFFA came about, and why does the world need OFFA?
Well, look, obviously I left the bank, which subsequently called Al Rayyan Bank, in 2019. I spent a year, I guess, traveling, helping to set up businesses, advising other people setting up businesses, keeping myself sharp, reacquainting myself with, I would say, the tools of any business, whether that's doing Excel, business plans, marketing plans, operations, regulations, and the new tools that came about. So I did a job where I had a completely remote workforce. This is before COVID.
Okay.
So I was using video.
So it did exist.
Yeah, so I was
yeah.
using, it wasn't Zoom, we were using Google Meet, I think, at that time. And I was running a company using technology. That project didn't work. And if there's a lesson, actually, that you should try things and you shouldn't get downhearted when something doesn't work. And it's knowing when to switch to something else and knowing when to persist. That's an art, and you kind of have to develop that deep-grained experience. So that I kind of essentially shut down a business, and it was better for me to return the investors' money. But anyway, so I ended up doing a fair bit of consulting, including being advisor chairman at OFFA. And I think that's where I saw a lot of potential. So OFFA was the first Sharia compliant bridging finance company. So helping people get short-term finance, when they want to buy a property on auction, or they want to refurb a property, there's no income coming in, and then they move off to another bank, ideally another Islamic bank, or they're selling the property, right? So some of the guys who do flipping, and then the guys who do up the property and then rent it out, build a portfolio. And we were the first, and I could see that there was definitely a growing market to support property investors, and a lot of property investors didn't have access to Islamic finance, especially the short-term element, getting what we call a below market value investment, moving fast to seize an opportunity. So that was great. However, the underlying raison d'etre of OFFA today is a bit different from that bridging company that we were in. So in 2022, so only three years ago, we reconstituted the management team. I stepped into an executive role, kind of leading that team. And what we found was there's a big gap in the market. So like any entrepreneur, you find there's a gap in the market. And the gap in the market was that actually, unlike what you said back in 2022, there weren't a lot of players. Some of the big Islamics, like the biggest Islamic bank, had stopped marketing new deals. There was only really one player operating. And actually, even from my experience at Al Rayyan and subsequently, the customer experience was not very good overall. people were complaining about the time it took to draw down on finance, the amount of paperwork, the lack of accessibility to finance, because there was just so many burdensome obstacles. And that's maybe true for actually regular finance as well, to a larger degree. So we saw an opportunity to create a product where it was super fast, that you could come to us, and I guess depending on your background, you could supply nothing and get an approval, because we were building the technology that would already check your bank statements, your pay slips, your credit history, an engine that essentially took away all that paperwork, and we could give you a decision in minutes, an offer in days, and help you on that journey. And the philosophy of OFFA is to work hand in hand with property investors to help them build their wealth. So it's not a traditional bridging company where it's short term, it's very transactional, and off you go. No, we want to grow with our customers. And so what that led to was our buy-to-let product, right? So all these features I'm talking about, we built into our buy-to-let project. So not only did I help you, or we would help you acquire that property, we'd then also help you finance it and build your portfolio. So it's about creating wealth for property investors, particularly those who have an ethical mindset and those who want Sharia compliant, faith-based financing. And that's a very, very different philosophy, that we do both ends. We do the short-term end, we do what we call the term end. And so you've got to, like any business, I advise, we talked about it at the CEOs Collective, you've got to find the gap, the niche, and you've got to pick the characteristic that you want to win. For us, it was speed of service. Yeah. Right? We want to be known for speed of service. Now, if you master that characteristic, whatever you choose, it might be that you want really high quality service. Yeah, you get a bunch of flowers when you get your offer letter, or whatever it is, and you delight people. You choose what you want to master. And if you master it, then it's not about just serving Muslims, right? People say, wait, I want speed. I want speed too.
So do you get many non-Muslim people come forward as well?
Yeah, we do. I mean, our prices are competitive in the Muslim market, in Islamic finance. They're very competitive in that sector. But particularly on the bridging side, because bridging is all about speed. I think at the last time I looked, we had about 44% of our book non-Muslim. And then on the buy-to-let side, we have a number of expats. Again, they're not Muslim. Yeah. They want to buy a property in the UK and rent it out with tax-free earnings from abroad. So, we're helping them as well. So that's the proposition. But look, the lessons are the key thing. Yeah. The lessons are find the gap. Don't worry about, there's a big player there. You'll always be able to carve out a niche and then make sure you drive dominance in what you select as your niche. And then you start building a business.
From my experience, Sultan, right, with Sharia compliant finance, I've always found people being very skeptical. And if I give one example, Sharia compliant mortgages, for example, we all know as Muslims, look, riba, interest is haram. And what we always find is that sometimes banks would still use that same process, but rather than calling it riba or interest, they would call it something else to make it Sharia compliant. Is that your experience? How do you kind of then navigate breaking that myth down that actually, yes, we're saying it's Sharia compliant, but we've gone through rigorous teachings or rigorous sort of imams or whoever, muftis or whoever signs it off to actually say, well, actually, yes, it is Sharia compliant. It's not just something that we're saying it for the sake of it.
Look, I think there is skepticism. Yeah. We know that exists, and there's probably a number of root causes. How many Muslims know enough about their own religion in any case? Yeah. Like even the 5 pillars, how many Muslims know about zakat in its true sense? Yeah, are educated in it. Yeah. We know that Allah says in the Quran that He declares war on those who consume riba. Yeah. But how does that translate to everyday life? What does that actually mean? Does it mean that finance should be cost-free, which is actually one of the big myths that exists? No, because it's based on a lot of the principles that of trading that existed at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and then subsequently continued into all the way to the Ottoman Empire, right? So it became quite there was quite a developed system of rules or fiqh, yeah, the jurisprudence of how man treats with man, fiqh mu'amalat. So these things have developed, and then there's been this hiatus, this big gap since I guess the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and then the 60s when Islamic finance started to come back, and then in this country the 2000s, late 90s kind of got a little bit, 2000s started to re-enter. So clearly it's natural that a lot of misunderstanding and education is missing around how things translate. And if you look at the first generation of Muslims who came here in the 60s, of course they were going to just take conventional products because that was all that was there. And so there's this become an embedded culture of accepting the norm being conventional. And so when a product that comes out fulfills the same need, I need a place to live. So there's an Islamic or a Sharia compliant version of a place to live. If it's got similarities, that's because the need is similar. Yeah. I need a place to live, I need to pay something. So at the moment I pay rent. Or if you're conventional, I pay a mortgage. So when Islamic finance came out, and it's actually shared ownership between, and I don't want to use that phrase in the conventional sense, which shared ownership is more like housing associations, it's not like that. But ownership is, there's two parties to the ownership, partners if you want to call it that. And for the part you don't own, you pay rent. However, ultimately, when all the contracts are said and done, you make a payment every month. Yeah. So to the layman, it looks similar. I make a payment every month. The payment goes up when the Bank of England rates go up, and the payment seems to go down when the Bank of England rates go down. And then they might think, well, that's just too similar, and that drives a skepticism. And so, but fundamentally, the contracts are very, very different. Yeah, you are essentially a part owner of a property, and you're paying rent. You're not taking a loan in its entirety and paying interest. And even though it might feel like, oh, I'm making payment, I'm living there. So the oft used example is cohabiting and marriage. So two people who cohabit, have children, put the children through school, have a life together. They might argue, I don't need to get married, it feels exactly the same. That couple next door, they're married and they do the same. Yeah. So what's the difference? The difference is there's a contract, and it's ordained by Allah that you get married. But people will say it feels the same. It might be, if you've tasted non-halal chicken, it might taste the same as halal chicken. I don't know, but it might do, right? Yeah. But we know one has been is legal for us, inverted commas, yeah, and one isn't, from a Sharia perspective. So we shouldn't necessarily look at these cash flows, right? You should say, actually, what's the contract? Yeah. Have I avoided riba? And I think with that education and people get that understanding, it's better to do that than to face warfare from God. Yeah.
So with the education,
yes,
I personally feel nowadays, and maybe in the past 4, 5, 6 years, when it comes to Islamic finance, I don't think there's enough education out there for Muslims, for the layman Muslim, for someone like myself. I don't know if you feel the same, but for example, if I go to a mosque, whether it's the Jummah khutbah, the Eid khutbah, it's still very much standard. Even though some of the imams who are more English speaking, they're younger, you would say our generation. But for me, it feels like Islamic finance is probably the last thing that they're going to talk about, educate. Some of it, I'm not judging, they probably don't even fully maybe understand it themselves. But in your experience, do you feel that same sentiment, that actually there is just not enough education, or do you feel that actually the ones who want to know about it, there's enough out there for them to learn?
It's a bit like anything. If you have an interest, I roll back the story to when I said I went and got some Islamic economics books. You had to go and find those books, right? It's much easier now, by the way, because the material was physical in those days. You had to go and find a library and try and
Yeah,
find
got
that
to
information.
library card out and everything.
Now
yeah.
there is a lot of material online. So if you're really interested, you can find it. There's a lot of books that were not around back in the early 2000s explaining practically how Islamic finance works. It was quite, prior to that in the 90s, it was very economics based, right? So there's a lot of material out there, but it doesn't necessarily lead to exposure to the layman, to the common Muslim, like you say. And that's part of education and awareness. The two are linked. Once you have awareness, and a bit like in sales, awareness and then desire, and I want the kind of information and then take action, the issue isn't the material, the issue is the awareness. And then I think reaching people through accessible education, simple education, videos, things that are explained in simple language. And people like IFG have done quite a good job on that. But how do I get that awareness into the masjid? It's a really important point. When somebody goes to Jummah, do they really hear about the war on riba, the war on the people who consume riba, and how we can tackle that? So many people have heard, these same people will have heard that for there to be barakah in your life and for your dua to be accepted, your income should be halal. And the way you spend your money should be halal. And it kind of stops there. It's like, okay, I'm working in a factory and I'm spending on my family. I must be halal. Yeah. But actually, do you then take it to the next level and think about, well, where does my pension go? Does it go to companies supporting regimes that are oppressing Muslims? Or this mortgage that I pay? I've never thought about it. Is that actually bringing me into riba? And so I think that's where the awareness could be created better by the imams of masajid, even if they're not expert. I think the second thing is I think it's important for them to become expert. Again, there'll be resources. People like the Riba Free Foundation are also developing education programs for imams. We as players in the industry, we can't just be there for property investors. We've got to engage with the community. Yeah. We should be supporting community initiatives, whether that's through sponsorship, doing education, helping people to learn not just about real estate, but also about Islamic finance. And I think I like to think most of them do to a degree, but I think maybe we could be a bit more coordinated. We can share resources. And that's why I welcome initiatives like the Riba Free Foundation. Yeah, no, they do some amazing work. Just going back to your Islamic products, in your experience, which Islamic products are out there and which ones are becoming more and more popular? Well, ever popular is still home finance, and particularly the finance required to finance your own home, right, where you live. I'm pleased to say OFFA will be launching their product because we're licensed by the FCA. So we're regulated to do so. So we'll be launching our product later this year, towards the end of the year. So that's good news. We'll be another player in the market. But you can see that there are existing players with billions of pounds of Islamic home finance. Of course, there's the buy-to-let finance that we do now. That's also growing, but it's never going to be as big as people wanting finance to live in. Whilst that's ever popular, what are the trends that we're seeing? We're seeing much more in the savings and investment space. So people who are reluctant and don't take riba from their banks on savings accounts are definitely looking for alternatives to generate income. And you've got to work in a risk spectrum. So some people want a relatively low risk. I'm not saying risk-free. It's not risk-free. We should take risk, but they want a better return than they might be getting from banks. And so, yes, you can go to Islamic banks, but you're seeing a lot more opportunities through peer-to-peer platforms, maybe some crowdfunding and funds as well. There's people like Wahid, there's people like IFG. So yeah, and there's more. I'm naming a few. I think that's exciting because that's providing the fuel for more finance. Yeah. So the industry is definitely getting bigger, the market's getting bigger. So one of the things I think you said at the beginning, why do we need another player? Actually, we need many players because the market is so big that all the players are currently growing quite well.
So where do you see Islamic finance in the next 10 to 20 years then? If you're saying that there's going to be more and more players, or there should be more and more players, and the market's ever growing sort of thing, where do you see, do you envisage actually potentially nearly every Muslim having a Sharia compliant mortgage, finance, business loans, bridging loans, etc. sort of thing? And actually, do you see Islamic finance being so big that your conventional banks might be thinking, hang on a second, we're losing business here, we're losing customers here because your offers and whatever are taking it, and therefore they might start thinking, we need to start offering. And actually you might even find, like you said, non-Muslims thinking, hang on a second, this finance system is so much more better than the one that we have. Do you envisage that potentially?
So it's a big question, and I think you have to temper expectations. In terms of a timeline of things, we're still in our infancy. Yeah, if you're comparing the conventional finance system to the Islamic finance system in a contemporary sense, conventional banks have been around for 400 years or something, right? You know, the Venetians, right through to, you know, older banks here from the Victorian era. So decades, like saying 2 decades, we've come a long way. If I look back over the last 2 decades, there was probably, barely 20-30 million pounds of Islamic finance mortgages. Today we know it's running into tens, over 10 billion probably, right? So we've made progress in the last 20 years. It'd be unrealistic to say that every Muslim is going to be using it. It's a very laudable objective, however, and that should be the vision, that every Muslim has access to and it can take a form of Islamic finance. I think that is a laudable objective. Whether they take it or not, that's probably linked to your education and awareness and everything else. In reality, for it to work, I think we do need to develop a scale player. And there's got to be somebody that has sufficient influence in the market that they can actually shape the market. And I really think that that's got to be one of the things that I would like to see in that 20-year period, that somebody emerges to be, like a 10 billion plus or a 20 billion plus balance sheet player in the market, where they can have a bit more influence. They can influence regulations to open up the market. They can support the community in many more ways than they do today. And I think, and maybe not one, ideally there'll be multiple ones, but we at least need one that emerges. And it may be that there'll be an amalgamation of some of the current players, so you get one big entity, or at least bigger entities. Because one of the things that holds us back is scale. Everybody is relatively small. As a result, pricing is impacted. As a result, it's an obstacle to those people who are on the fence. So I'll take Islamic if a pricing is competitive, very common kind of outlook. We can start then capturing more of them. And then once they experience Islamic finance, if we can also give them state-of-the-art technology, and it's much more feasible now as technology becomes cheaper and more accessible, I think we can. So actually, compared to the last 20 years, like when I started, remember, it was still telephone banking, and then we kind of remember, we launched internet banking, and now it's all, hey, everything's, mobile, and it's web OS. So we know that technological innovation is happening faster. So the previous 30 years will happen in 10 years. So I'm always very sanguine and optimistic about things. So inshallah, something will happen, and more people will be able to take Islamic finance.
Inshallah. You mentioned one thing about community. Now, we've had a chat before. Excuse me. You're big on community. You're big on local community. You're so big about local community. You support the local football team, which is fine. But from a Muslim point of view, how do you see Muslims now? Let's just take Birmingham for example. Birmingham, massive Muslim community. Do you feel that within the community we do enough as businesses giving back to our local community, which may well be using local other suppliers, and also even within that Muslim to Muslim sort of thing, or do you still feel that actually there's still barriers that we still within the community who actually probably want to see others fail, others, do you still find businesses feel like, actually, I want my neighbour to fail because actually then I could take his or her customer sort of thing? How's your experience in that?
Yeah, so you have cycles of competition and collaboration. And competition is healthy, so it's good for the consumer. And if you're competing to do good, we're exhorted to compete to do good deeds in the Quran and in the Sunnah. Compete to do good deeds. But when your intention of competition is to see somebody go down, not because they're doing, I'll use the word loosely, evil or bad deeds, right? But actually, it's some form of egotistical dominance. Then that's where you maybe cross the line, because we do also need to collaborate, because the strength in numbers for any industry. So yes, whilst in the Islamic finance today, as an example, we compete. But I like to think that we also respect each other, and then we work together, whether that's on industry bodies, to enlarge the market, to enlarge education, to enlarge the lobby to have regulations changed. So coming back to community, Birmingham, as an example, 1.1 million people, 30% are Muslim in the last census. So that implies at least like 320,000 people, but they largely live in central Birmingham. So in central Birmingham, it's probably close to 50%. So you've got this kind of immense market, and what we call agglomeration. You have businesses that grow up. So when you say supporting the community, you get a lot of halal businesses because a lot of Muslims live in central Birmingham. And then the non-Muslim businesses will do offer halal options, right? So if you take that example, that's been a good thing in terms of choice. For Muslims, whereas when we grew up, halal restaurants were few and far between. If you went to school, you wouldn't have a halal option. And I'm not saying it should dominate to the exclusion of everything else. We need to be accepting that there'll be people who are vegetarian and people who don't want halal or whatever. So we need to give options. But as a community, if the businesses support their local businesses, then their city becomes stronger, as opposed to always going for the cheapest supplier. You have to look at the bigger ecosystem. And there's a very good book called The Barakah Effect. To put barakah in your business, there's a barakah of doing business for the right reasons, the intention. It's like you come to me and I don't know, you buy a coffee from me and I say, well, have his biscuits on me for free. Yeah. Right? And it's because, actually, it's not because I want something more from you, but I'm just engendering a sense of giving rather than exploiting. Yeah, it's the person who will give measure for measure, is an honest trader. You'll keep coming back, and then their business grows. And I think if we can engender barakah, all the Muslim business can engender barakah, then they'll serve Muslims and non-Muslims alike, and they'll help each other, and then the city grows stronger. There's more employment. And then we can focus on some of the social issues. I don't want to mask over social issues that we face in Birmingham, in Muslim areas. And social capital, Islam has solutions for this. If you go back in time, we had the waqf, which is the modern version of which is called an endowment. But the concept of waqf was very prevalent in Muslim society in the Arabic empires, the Ottoman Empire. There is a waqf. There was a waqf in Istanbul. For when a waiter breaks a plate, historically they had to pay for that plate out of their salary. But there was a waqf that would help that waiter pay for that plate. So that they would basically invest, it was invested in something, there was some income. There was a waqf to look after cats. Like the RSPCA here, it would be based on an endowment concept, right? So you've got to think that there's, and zakat. Zakat is about, I'm the chair of National Zakat Foundation. Zakat isn't just about transferring money from a giver to a recipient. It is actually about creating a supportive welfare system. to uplift the Muslims, right? So that they don't have to be recipients. And then in a modern context, it's reducing the burden on the taxpayer as well, right? Yeah, if we get rid of social ills. So yeah, community is very important to me. And I think Islamic finance companies, right? You've heard of ESG, yeah? Environment, social, governance, big, kind of ethical finance attributes. Well, our natural domain is the S. Yeah, we need to work on the E and the G. Social, Islamic finance and social, it's all about the people, it's all about the community. We naturally should be in the S.
So you say naturally should, but how do you view, are we? Do you feel that we are, or do you think that actually we should be doing better?
Yeah, so if you're providing services, in my previous career in Islamic finance, I was serving 500 masjid and charities, right? So, they were struggling with bank accounts. There's this concept of debanking or de-risking. They were struggling to get bank accounts. Subject to the normal regulations, we would try to support them. There needs to be entities that help people finance community initiatives, community centres, build infrastructure to support some of the social things, social problems that we've talked about. If you look at it purely from a banking play, it's like, it's a community centre. What sort of credit is that? But actually, I can't think of many masjids where, if they had a debt that they didn't pay off, the community comes together, or a community centre that's adding a lot of value that wouldn't pay pay the finance that they took. But you find that many financial institutions are very unwilling to do that. Now, it may be that they've got constraints on their funding. I can't judge. I know there'll be difficulties for me to do some of it, but where I can, I'll help. And that's the sincerity and intention you want. I've got difficulties, but I want to help. And there'll be different ways to help.
Okay, perfect. Sultan, just before we wrap up, something that we do with all our guests, I'm going to shoot some very short Q&A, quick, snappy questions at you. So keep them short, the answers. So if you didn't get into Islamic banking, I know you're an accountant, so scrap that. But if you didn't get into Islamic banking, what career would you have liked? Looking back now, what do you reckon you could have liked to have gone into? Probably
the family businesses. I would have. I enjoy food. I enjoy cooking. Yeah. Bangladeshi. Yeah. It would have been a restaurant somewhere. Maybe with a bit more quality of life. I worked in restaurants as a youngster. Yeah. Quality of life isn't great, but if there was a way of doing that, I probably would have ended up there. What's your favourite fish? What's your favourite? My favourite fish. Favourite food. What's your favourite food? I'm still partial to red meat, so I like. You can't beat some good lamb chops, can you? Okay. Mentioned before, you support your local football team, so Birmingham City. Exciting times. Do you think you'll be in the Champions League in 5 years' time? What I want to say is I've been through some really dark times there, and they're on a crest of a wave. They're investing billions in Birmingham, inner city poorest area, Alum Rock, Baldersley Green. Which, to be fair, is great. And you know what? One of the things I don't think the Man City owners get credit for is they've obviously done that similarly in Manchester as well, sort of thing, yeah. So this, by all accounts, will be an even bigger site than the Etihad campus in terms of area. So there's these big plans for a super stadium and all these ancillary stuff, 365 days. But coming back to the football, which is obviously where it started, I've sat as a season ticket holder there for many years. I'm really optimistic that they'll be in the Premier League. Maybe they'll scrape it into Europe, but in 5 years, Champions League might push it, but Europe in 5 years. All right, that's fine. What do you think is the biggest myth about Islamic finance? That it's cost free. It's like, it's free. It's like it's an interest-free loan means, that there's no cost in Islamic finance. There is some cost. You mentioned investments before. Yes. What would you advise that could be a potential sound investment to make? I would look into health tech, because you've got an aging population, you've got huge advances in technology from AI, augmented reality, biotech. I think there's going to be some major innovation. So today it's all about digital, isn't it? Your Googles and your Apples and whatever. But actually, health, which everybody will be obsessed with as time goes by, I think that is a big area. So if you can find some health tech investments, I'd probably look in that.
Okay. And lastly, one Islamic value that you live by daily.
So for me, you know what they say, iman goes up and down.
Yeah.
You know, faith goes up and down. So what can keep you anchored is duty, and it's not a popular answer in some respects. You know, people say you got to do it for love, you got to do it for sincerity, but because iman goes up and down, something that holds you in place is duty. And duty, I mean, you know, we have obligations to our family, obligations to Allah, you know, to worship Him, and if you can hold firm to your duties, to your family, to your community, to Allah, first and foremost, that can keep that thread even when it sometimes wavers.
Yeah.
I'm going to do my duty.
Okay, brilliant. So what's next for you, Sultan? I mean, when I read your bio, you're involved in a lot of things, but what's next for you? Where do you see yourself and potentially OFFA?
So yes, my immediate priorities are OFFA in particular. It's at that critical scale-up stage, so I want to see it through for the next 3 to 4 years to do that, and I think that will consume my time. I think there's some. It's an exciting industry. I'll be supporting the industry as well. But I mentioned to you we're launching our home finance product. That will be big. We will keep investing in tech. You have to. So one of the flip sides of a coin is if you don't keep investing in tech, your tech becomes outdated. So we'll keep doing that. And growth. Trying to be that player that I mentioned there, which trying to be one of those sizable players. And then beyond that, as I grow older, I always say to people that and I know you wanted a short answer, but that I've coached, so I do a fair bit of mentoring and coaching, is when you're young, you're at that investment phase of your career. So don't drive your decisions by money. Work to learn, not to earn. When you can afford to do that when you're younger, then you know life catches up. I've got to have home finance, I've got to have kids and whatever. I've got to earn some more, but still keep learning. And then as you hit the other side, where you maybe earning income, your experience carries you a long way. You should be giving back to society more and more, and that for us should manifest itself in charitable work, social work. I always say don't hold off till you're older.
Yeah.
Do some at every stage of your life. But you know, I want to be able to. I guess I'm blessed that I can spend up to a day a week right now working on the social side, and you know, as I get past this next scale-up phase, I want to make that 2 days a week, and then when I retire, it's going to be let's help as many organisations with the experience I've got in the social sector. So that's what I think.
Alhamdulillah. Lastly, you want to help as many people as you can. People listening want to get in touch with you, want a bit of, get a bit of wisdom from you. How best can they do that?
Well, there's a lot of good stuff on our website at OFFA, so www.offa.co.uk. OFFA is OFFA after King Offa. We didn't really talk about that, but we can talk about it another time. So offa.co.uk, a lot about our products and inquiries. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube that I've done, and obviously.
Is that your own personal YouTube channel?
I'm on various platforms, and of course, if you really want to, are more interested in the social side, social finance, zakat, nzf.co.uk, so .org.uk, nzf.org.uk. There is a plethora of information on zakat and the community and how we're trying to help society here. The big vision for it. So either of those organisations, you can get hold of me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair, Sultan. Really, really enjoyed it. I mean, it's been an eye-opener for me because I'll be first to admit I'm not that much clued up about Islamic finance. It's not something, again, the classic, it's not something that is really talked about, educated about, but I've learned a lot and, some food for thought for me to consider as well. But from Muslim CEO's point of view, a massive thank you for coming on today. It's been insightful. Inshallah, like I said, there's probably so much more we can talk about, and who knows, in the future we'll have you back on again. But just want to say Jazakallah khair for coming on. And like you said, in the future, inshallah, may Allah give OFFA the barakah and all the other sort of Islamic banks that barakah to grow, to be that player, because at the end of the day, it's going to hopefully benefit us and the Ummah as well. So, Jazakallah khair for coming on.
No, Jazakallah khair for the opportunity to have an enjoyable chat.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like work, does it?
No, 100% it doesn't.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Brothers and sisters, Jazakallah khair for listening to another episode which no doubt you will have found inspiring and valuable. You can listen again, inshallah, on our YouTube channel or on our podcast platforms by searching for Muslim CEOs. All our links are listed per episode, and you can also visit the website Muslim CEOs for further details about the Muslim CEO Collective. Remember to follow and connect Muslim CEOs on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Please do leave us a comment if you have enjoyed the episode and if you have any questions. Until next time, remember us in your du'as, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us steadfast and put barakah in our health and our wealth. Ameen and Assalamu alaikum.